All right, we're live.
We're live, and I guess it's time to welcome our viewers to a special edition of the Humanode FireSide. We're usually on Discord, so people don't have to look at these ugly faces, but we're live on camera with very good friends from Keystate Capital, Nicholas and Niza. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I guess introductions are in order. I'm Nicholas Rotz of Keystate Capital, senior partner, and this is Niza Gonzalez. Niza, would you mind introducing yourself?
I have
Well,
yeah, I have a
well,
feeling that her cameras and mic is still down.
yeah, she just texted me there was a power outage locally where she was at, so
They
she might
always
have.
happen before the live stream, always.
Right.
We
Yeah.
had the same
Exactly.
last week.
So I mean, if that's if she's intermittent, she's intermittent, but she's our head of research, so and a verifiable expert in the topic of digital identity, hailing from Honduras. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. And Victor, do you want to uh, help introduce what the special interest or, or the thing that sparked interest in Key State Capital was?
Well, I already they do great research. The research that it's not just the research on the paper, it's the whole application to discover identity protocols, which blockchains use them, which standards they use, and how are those identity protocols even connected to governments. And I mean, when you have such kind of research, you guys look like the pretty much best financial institution to work on identity, because I've never seen anything like that before. And well, funny thing that I've seen the map before, I completely forgot about it. It was a while ago, and now we're like having a call with Keystate Capital. I learned about the fact that you created this map, and I'm just, wow, do you have Humanode there? And the thing that really surprised me is that they don't have Humanode yet, but we will solve it.
Well, well,
Very
there's
interesting
a lot of.
they have. Well, if there is no Humanode, because when you look at this map, it's really like not only Web3. I think it's mostly not Web3, because the protocols that you state there are really focusing on government level adoption, unlike us for now, and that's very interesting for me.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
so I
yep.
would say, the Web of Trust map, and I should have led with this. My apologies. Keystate Capital, we released this earlier this March when we were attending the Decentralized Identity Unconference Europe DICE conference in March. Um, it's a labor of love. We've put about 3 years of research into it, pulling from the experts in the field of decentralized identity, hailing from SSI. So a lot of cypherpunk libertarian like ethos around self-sovereign identity, where this kind of W3C standard of DIDVC comes into play. And so we wanted to kind of map out the ecosystem and understand the connections both interpersonally, interorganizationally, and intertechnically, right? And there's a lot of layers to that. Um, but yeah, it's quite as to why Humanode would not be there. I mean, it's nothing personal. We had to like there's so many applications of digital identity. It bleeds into every single aspect of our daily lives that you could argue that almost every tech company is an identity company in some form or fashion. So we had to narrow the criteria, and we did so by kind of saying, okay, are you working with public institutions to help onboard them into these sort of technical standards? And so that's the main reason. And we also had and Niza would, if she had a good connection, she would be able to explicate how we had a set date of cutoff where if you perhaps didn't initially feature any sort of public entity interaction, but after our cutoff date, you did interact with, say, a local government of some kind, then we would love to include you. It's just we need to do a second pass and kind of collect all this data, because we did all this by hand. Like, yeah, we have a bunch of agentic AI coming down the pipeline. We didn't initially feature any sort of public entity interaction. We got feedback now.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I don't know who that is.
I'm not sure.
We got a surprise party. But anyways, so yeah, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Do you guys
You were
remember?
saying that you were manually adding the projects for 3 years. It's been great work, and you had to narrow it down. Of course, like if we talk about identity, you could say that Google account is kind of identity as well, right? But it's out of scope probably of your map, or isn't it?
Well, it will be once Google Wallet starts taking verifiable credentials, which it seems like we're going that way. There's a lot of discussions, if you look at the right technical discussions of like, right, standardizing DIDs, which are decentralized identifiers, and seeing how that's being uptaken. The Googles, the Facebooks, the Mozillas are starting to try to kind of corral it, because they want to control the entries and exit points, right? Because that's their business model. But in due time, I think they'll be quite relevant.
If you may, Shannon, I know you have some questions, but it's just it's good for beginning to understand whether we and the audience understand identity that's the same way, because it's kind of a very broad term that is different in different contexts. And I always understood for myself identity is like data about you as a person that you can share or not. And it's like, it can be your passport data, it can be your on-chain trace, it can be your, well, all the information about you, your age, whatever. This is what I understand identity is. And well, yeah, I would love to hear your thought on it, your definition.
I think something relevant in the space that is kind of coming up quite a bit more recently is this sort of notion of proof, right? And I would say, these sort of aspects of identity you just mentioned are more so the proof of your identity, right? And rather than the identity itself, right? Your activity, your liveness, right? Again, a key part of the proof of this proof of human consensus method you guys are featuring at Humanode. Is an essential aspect, right, of identity, right? And I think in this case, it's actually quite an existential question, right? There's a really great podcast by Jonathan Pajot, where he talks about, right, how the notion of identity is extremely modern, right, and it actually originates from a non-secular notion of the soul. So it's like the soul, like we used to think of ourselves as ensouled, right? And then we pass through this kind of secular filter, and now we have this concept of identity. But it's essentially the same thing, right? It's this kind of notion of who am I, why, what am I here for, who am I a member of, right? What are my goals? And I think Humanode is doing a really interesting experiment, I think, for such an agora of connections of people,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, when you think of the general concept of identity, I mean, other than your driver's license and your address and your birth certificate and whatever, I mean, when it comes to a personal identity, it's usually, it could be based on your background, your inheritance, your financial model, where you work for. I mean, in Japan, your identity is based on who you work for and which city, which section of the city you live in.
Absolutely.
But, I think one thing that we've done a lot of talking about in Humanode, and especially, with Dato and Victor, is the fact that if you try to look at this at a global scale and try to include a whole global infrastructure that is
Mhm.
fair for all, the only um, identity we can really come down to is your biometric identity as a foundation, and not consider anything else: where you live, what your beliefs are, the color of your hair, your hairstyle, if you have hair or not. It's like, all who you work for, uh, which government you're under. Is like, forget all about that and bring it down to the sense, we can't, although we can create soul-bound tokens for the, using the word, um, it's not like we can tag our soul digitally. So the next best thing would be our biometric identity. And if we're able to use this as an identifier and keep it private, although you're able to prove that you are yourself, and you might have tags on it, like I might be known as Shannon, or like in Humanode S9. Um, People can see my tag. They can't, and well, because I'm connected there, um, through Biomapper or whatever. Um, there's proof that I exist and that I am alive, at least for the past week or so, that I'm alive. And if you have that at a foundation, you can actually add layers to it while keeping the core identity private. Of course, if you open up more information as you add layers, people might be able to guess who you are, or some people might keep it totally open. But identity really, if you look at the very foundation, it it's like your existence. So I guess there's the approach of a lot of the mega corporations and the governments, um, with their identity of what's on track, what's on the data, and building systems from this way, where we're building, okay, what is the bare minimum we need to know, and what needs to be remain what needs to be private, what is um, what should be almost considered to be a human right to uh, keep private.
Right. It's a really fundamental question, I would say, and it kind of gets into these sort of and this is why I admire the audacity of what you guys are trying to do with Humanode. Is that you're essentially defining an axiomatic set of rights for people that you deem worthy to run infrastructure for this social experiment, right? In this case, using liveness and biometrics explicitly, right? I mean, these systems typically have done this implicitly. Like if you have a Google or an email account, usually it's like you think it's a person that's associated. Now that assumption is being really challenged, right, with a
Crashed.
lot of
Yeah.
these generative AIs and other approaches, as you guys know, right? Hence why you're trying to introduce this civil protection mechanism. Um, yeah, it's just a very interesting notion, and I think honestly, I think the sort of like notions of network states, right, are going to be wholly dependent on how robust those axioms that you're building on are.
And
True. True.
we could go into talking about government models, or use of this um, biometric identity in noble systems. Today, there's just to throw this in there, we had an interesting conversation in the media channel where we were talking about different use cases of what um, the private biometric identity can be used for. And one of the team members said, what it would be really nice to have it for is dating apps. And I was like, why? So, well, I was just going through. I just used the dating app a while ago, and I was, swiping through all these people, and then I started to realize that each person on there has 4, 5, 6 different identities, trying to catch as many fish as possible. It's like if there's only a way that you could prove that this account belonged to a real human being and it was unique, I'd have a better chance of finding someone. It's like, with everything becoming so digital and with the whole digital identity being something that, in a sense, is, I don't know if taken for granted is the right word, but being abused at the same time, where you can create so many different identities for, your mood of the day. I'm just trying to think how many projects out there get stuck on this issue of saying, okay, who are our real users? Who are the real people here? Is there any way to prove this person is real beyond, let's say, a boundary of a nation or a county or whatever?
Right, right, and I personally, I mean, I believe that this notion of pseudonyms is actually you not only is it a right, you essentially can't prevent people from ever taking on one, right? Even the guise of purporting to represent yourself a certain biometric way as well is an option that they will present themselves voluntarily to the rest of the world, right? Hence the notion of this sort of self-sovereign identity like approach. Drummond Reed is actually a legend in the space. He wrote the book on digital identity. We actually educated our researchers on this guide to decentralized identity and this notion of how this actually works technically and interpersonally with governance frameworks as well. And it's just very interesting stuff. But the stuff that he's doing right now and focused on full time is something called a first person credential, which is a privacy preserving method of building pairwise relationships, which then can be aggregated into personas, right? While we're still preserving the individual root. So like, for example, the way, so I think of like the original web of trust. So like our map is called the web of trust, right? But originally it comes from a term for Phil Zimmerman from PGP coined, where there'd be this peer-to-peer key exchange, right? Of like secure, pretty good privacy, that's what it stands for. Secure email, encrypted, signed, everything, right? Messages from person to person. And now, like with technologies like Carry, which is the key event receipt infrastructure, you now can like have discovery mechanisms, right? Where peering relationships don't just have to happen like in person, though it's probably preferable if you don't have like a proof of humanity like Humanode can provide. That you can't trust anything you see on the internet. So right, there's a whole bunch of interesting solutions, and I just said that as one approach that are trying to solve that exact problem, right? Because the cat's out of the bag. DPI is only going to digital public infrastructure is only going to get more digital, right? I mean, governments, they're all digitizing, right? Day-to-day interactions are becoming more digital. So finding out where those real roots of trust are extremely important. And so I think the hammer, the gauntlet's being thrown down. Like, who can provide the best possible solution for resolving identity at scale, both at an infrastructure level and at a personal level?
And I wonder, in your experience, in your research, who is currently the most adopted by the public infrastructure as a project, like, and how much adoption they could gain? Yeah.
In what sense? Do you mean like in like user
In terms of
base?
users, I would say, yeah, in terms of users, but especially in the public government sphere.
I'm just going to take what you say as like in terms of like a decentralized identity. So not like these. I mean, oh, actually, to be honest, if we just take the whole enchilada, Adhar, right, as flawed of as an approach as they took with their data breaches and how they centrally manage people's PII, personal identifiable information, Adhar from India is the number one source of digital identity in the world. They onboarded 1 billion plus people. Guys, that's incredible. Like 1 billion plus people in a digital system. I mean, good God. That's it's impressive stuff.
That's huge. That's huge.
Well, yeah, and what's really interesting is, and I recommend you guys check this out. There is a project they're trying to do called the Finternet, which is featured by the same people that made Adhar, and they're essentially going to use that ID system to onboard digital asset ownership. Oh yeah, Cosmic Cadences says so many leakages with Adhar, and yeah, it literally was also not only the biggest onboarding mechanism with Adhar, but also the biggest leak known to mankind of personal identifiable information, right? So it's kind of a catch-22, right? Great adoption, lots of users, but then you have compromised information. I don't know about biometrics. I don't know the Adhar system in depth, but you're essentially, if you don't like transition into infrastructure of managing digital assets with these identifiers, you essentially have built a huge honeypot, right? So they've really got to nail transition right,
Well, biometrics can also be a honeypot, but we're solving this as well with privacy tech.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the tools in the toolkit for sure. Yeah, Cosmic Cadence says even my biometric data got leaked. I mean, good. I mean, and this is like you start to get into other sources of leakages, right? Like in healthcare, it's like healthcare is actually the number one most valuable data sources for black markets.
Yeah. Oh, living in Japan, they finally got around to issuing a card, which they call the My Number card. It's like your social security number. And it's this piece of plastic with a chip in it that has all your information on it. And basically the government decided that they needed to move on into the 21st century finally and create a card with all this information so all the local cities don't have to carry all stacks of paper. The only thing is most of the population didn't want anything to do with it, so they had to find a way to force it onto people. And what they did was they said, okay, from now on your national health insurance is tied to this. And not only your national health insurance, your bank information is tied to it. And sometime later this year, they're going to tie your driver's license to it. And
I hope it's private.
Well, you see, they have this piece of plastic that you put the card in to keep it private, so it doesn't show the address or the direct number.
It's real privacy here.
Yeah, but it has been
like
hacked.
cash.
It has been hacked so many times. I think half the public information has already been leaked, and people have to use it whenever they go to the hospital or pay taxes or have a bank transaction. All this data is there and is being leaked to the black market, and it's like.
I've seen actually a crazy story about that in particular. It might not be the exact same system, but I know it's in Japan, where I think for an entire jurisdiction, canton, district, I don't know what you call it, there was some government official who had like everyone's personally identifiable information on a thumb drive.
Yes.
And he got blasted on sake or something, like was partying all night. And like he's like, you know, and in Japan, apparently they're very respectful. If you're drunk, they'll just leave you there on the ground, and
Yes.
you can sleep and you can wake up. And so he did. He's like, oh, okay, what happened? And he lost the thumb drive of like hundreds of thousands of people. It's like, this is not a way to administer a data ecosystem.
Yeah.
You can't do it this way. And you're touching on something really interesting as well. I mean, and this is something that I think I would love for you guys to look into. One of the design principles that I think will be quite important for us to wrap our heads around in the next few years, at least, if not decade, will be the notion of getting rid of shared secrets. Right, like having a secret that is both the identifier and the key, so symmetric key, right, is one of the biggest faults in all of our information security ecosystems. And the entirety of the internet is built on it. The entirety of the internet. Like we're talking about like all the bootstrap security mechanisms which have been bolted on, like 2FA, all that, right, are just compensating for this core critical flaw in how we've seen these wholesale institutions be constructed, right? And so in essence, right, like, and I'll give you an example, like social security number, right? You cannot let anyone know what your social security number is, because it's a way both of proving who you are and also gaining access to key critical services and other information that might also lead to other compromises like bank accounts and phone numbers, and so, right, this is just, this cannot fly, it cannot scale. And so really, and this is where, you know, we're talking about worldwide scalability, right, worldwide adoption and secure attribution at scale. We need to move towards systems that are asymmetric, right, where everything essentially is a public-private key pair, and that you keep that private key private, you have your public key available, which I assume Humanode is built on similar principles.
Oh, well, yeah, of course, each blockchain is built on the same principle.
Right.
I mean, private public key pair, and then the biometrics for now, for us, due to security reasons, because we're building basically security infra based on biometrics, and the biometrics are not your key, right? The biometrics just used to figure out if you're unique or not, and yeah,
right.
In that sense, we're like completely Web3 accounts. That's it. Nothing
right.
else.
The biometrics are like kind of like a reputation, right? If you can continually prove the biometric, you have this solid reputation. And if you like don't prove it within a certain period, is it like a week, like per week or something?
Oh yeah, for validators, it's not only reputation, it's also the only way to get rewarded for your work, like if it's good or not. I mean, running a node, and the reputation builds on top of it, right? Because you have one public address, we have no idea who you are, but we know that you verified uniqueness already 50 times, right, throughout years. And now we can find out on chain that maybe you participated, maybe you tried other applications on Humanode network, and then we can see that, yeah, you're a valuable user, whoever you are, wherever you are, doesn't matter. You're important part of our community, and we can build, well, incentivized systems based on it. We can give more voting rights to these people, more proposal rights, things like that in the decentralized organization. That's what we're going to do.
Just curious, for Humanode, are you guys looking into a like single sign-on featuring a Humanode ID?
So this is technically really, it's hard. So we have, well, partner companies, so to say, Human Tech, they are working on it. They are still combining biometrics with your unique password. So you have to have both. You can't just have biometrics. Why? Because biometrics are probabilistic and key generation is deterministic.
Exactly.
And you can have a few keys from the same face, or unfortunately, your face can change so much that you can't even get the first key. you always used. So it's really difficult to use just biometrics, and we're focusing on something we can be sure about. Just a two-factor, thingy, not one factor.
Right.
But we're slowly getting there. I mean, maybe in 5 years we will be doing just biometrics without.
Do you guys have any notions of decentralized key management? So not just like going to a centralized administrator for account recovery, or do you have like kind of like communal recovery mechanisms, or have you considered that?
No, like social recovery, things like that.
Something
Well,
like that,
that's not what we're working on. Of course, we thought about that,
yeah.
and well, there are pretty good DKM systems already
Yeah.
out there that we could use for sure.
Mhm. So yeah, I mean, the reason why I bring it up, Drummond Reed also was he was commissioned by the DHS for a like a grant to actually figure out how to solve these systems. So I mean, it's a critically important um, problem that like both individuals, communities, and governments need to solve, right? Um, so it's really cool stuff. I love to see how you guys solve that in the future.
There are social wallets already that
Yeah.
have recoveries or social mechanisms. You just delegate 5 wallets the right to
Right.
do that, or even
Yeah.
multi-sig them to the right to recover your assets if your account is lost or you're dead. Yeah, Argent were one of the first ones, the most hyped ones.
Mhm.
This is important part of the structure. We would rather partner up with others to have.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, if it works, why reinvent the wheel?
I mean, there's so many, amazing projects out there that focus on different elements of, the whole problem. They're able to bring the best at the time together. Well, definitely.
Yeah, I also wanted to refer back to the web of trust. This is what we're thinking about more in terms of maximizing Sybil resistance, right? So we now have biometric Sybil resistance, but what if all the biometric protocols and algorithms we use start to fail against the new super AI who created thousands of identities and captured the network power, basically? And well, the answer would be, for redundancy, we could add the layer of this web of trust, social verification, and luckily we have Bright ID. They exist for 7-8 years, and the protocol works well. And recently we finally had the release of Circles. If you heard about Circles, you will love it. It's also a great financial experiment. Circles by Gnosis. Yeah, the guys were
Oh,
working on it also
yeah.
for 6-7 years, and now they finally have their like second version, which is already awesome. And it's also like a new money creation protocol, which
Right. Like
is,
it's a form
I
of
think, an
UBI.
experiment on the level of Humanode in terms of economics, or pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I think it's speaking on that approach. I mean, a lot of like we've talked with. I mean, I'm on the board of a digital identity company called Checked, and we've interfaced a lot with um, the guys from what was Polygon ID and now became Privado ID, and now like I'm sure you've seen their Billions project.
Millions
No,
of projects.
brilliant. No, the project is called Billions.
Billions. Oh yeah, that's their next project.
Right. Yeah. It's I mean, it's kind of like WorldCoin. They're trying to crack the nut of like unique human representation on their network, right? So there's a lot of demand again for what Humanode is doing. Um, yeah, Fair is recognizing that. Yeah, it's interesting though because like everyone has their own flavor, right? Some are purely are hardware specific, right? Like WorldCoin using their or World using their orb, right? To like, and God knows where that data goes when you give your eye to it. But and forgetting also the ethical problem that like OpenAI incepted at one end, creating the demand for this digital identity solution on another. Um, that aside, yeah, it's just interesting to see all the different flavors, and I love the kind of I don't know how to say this, like not quite anarchic, but like the openness of what Humanode's trying to do in terms of like not being hardware specific, but actually trying to
Yeah,
keep this
actually. So
good.
for the Billions network, okay, it's they're based on Privado ID, which is Polygon ID in the past. And Polygon ID works not as the biometric provider themselves, but they have different issuers that
Yep.
combination create your identity. And basically, Humanode is free to go integrate with Privado ID and be a part of Billions network as biometric infrastructure. So we have a lot of things we could connect to be honest. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the next one, spoiler, would be announced like in the next 2 weeks. So the one
Yeah.
we finally connected to, yeah.
Sweet.
All of these
Sweet.
reputation systems, attestations, aggregators like Gitcoin, all of those, we're all interconnected. We even
That's
don't
awesome.
feel, yeah, we don't feel like competitors even with the biometric guys. Why? Because, well, if they got great biometric algorithm, we can take it, integrate it in the Humanode private enclaves and network. So
Yep.
yeah.
I mean, again, that's a great strategy. You definitely need to put your systems to the test to really start to capture value for your users. And the more revenue streams you can secure for token holders, the stronger, the more momentum you'll build here. Um, I think a lot of it also has to do with like, finding that right balance. Because essentially, like Humanode kind of becomes almost as like a central bank in a sense, a decentral bank, in how, it's issuing coins, right? Like, so I know there's this kind of self-regulating economic mechanism here, right? Could you talk more about that?
So
Or
yeah, we can. Uh, right now, basically, we are incentivizing the network to work, right? Because we have to incentivize validators, we have to incentivize ecosystem devs to build on the network, because we're still in the bootstrapping period. But the eventual idea is that Humanode network, every person is a validator. It's not like you scan your eye or face once and you're getting free money after that. It's not our case. We have a more sustainable, not just airdrop token model, whereby in a couple of years, hopefully even this year, once we get more apps on chain that have a lot of users and pay a lot of fees, these fees would go to they already go to validators, but it's not enough. So these fees would go to our validators, and the set number of validators who get the fees will depend on the network activity. So you see, eventually, yeah, we won't. Our idea is that Humanode shouldn't be the asset which devalues when it just lies in your wallet, like with any proof of stake or proof of work network, because validators get more than token holders. In our case, we think that with the model that we have of one person, one node, we can decrease the security costs for supporting the validators and make it, on par with the actual network revenue. Yeah. So
that's exactly what you should be aiming for. Right. Finding that net neutral, and then, just eking out that edge, right? To
like one
incentivize.
thing grows, another grows after it. That's
Right.
it. And already validators, they start to understand, guys, we just stop farming Humanode, go use it, and we will all benefit like more and more from it. Because
Do, do you do you have like a target mechanism for like how many nodes you want in the network?
Actually, eventually, of course, it's like if we can get to 1 million nodes, it would be great. Our initial goal, I mean, we started with, aiming for 300. We have like 1,600 to 1,800 now. Our
Mm.
next milestone is 10,000. But
yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
just to give you a ballpark number, if we get our chain to the level of activity of, let's say, top 5 chains like Base or well, Base is L2, not a chain, but still like Base, Avalanche, let's say Binance Smart Chain. By having to pay validators from $10 to even $50 a month, we could have 100,000 of validators based on the fees they now get, as a network. So if we extrapolate it to our network, we would get to 100,000, and that's what Base just puts in the pocket of Coinbase for now.
Do you Okay, interesting. Very interesting stuff. So in every one of these nodes is like a full node, not like a light client, right?
Yeah, all of them are full nodes, have all the data, participate in the permissionless consensus, almost like PBFT, like almost all the networks have in our industry now.
Yep.
And one of the important things here is that the nodes are strictly tied into the governance. It's not like Humanode has a governance token. Each node, because it's one person, one node, and each node has one vote. So as this moves forward, the more nodes we have as a network and the more participation we have in the governance, the more secure it is. Let's say if you only had 100 nodes or 1,000 nodes, and somebody comes in and decides to spend some money to get a lot of digital identities, or to get people to scan their face for a vote, let's say, it's possible to rig the system. But let's say if it costs,
like it's possible to break any blockchain. Well, not to break it. You can't actually steal money when you have finalization on the chain, right? But you can hold the blockchain, which is really bad for a decentralized system. And it takes it takes really a few entities in proof of stake and proof of work, because you have miners and you have big mining pools in Ethereum. Staking pools. And yeah, in general, if you look at proof of stake networks, like it takes around 10. If it's 30, it's already very cool. And if they collude, they can stop the network if you want. Yeah. In case of Humanode, the number is much higher, but you don't need to have any money because that's to start a node, because that's one of our principles, which we are not going to change. Like you need one HMD, which is 3 cents. So
remember the origination. We're talking about you're starting with new axioms, right? You're starting new governance mechanisms in a way, right? And when the United States first started, right, George Washington actually famously warned against the inception of political parties, right? That they would be a distortion, right, of the republic that was being established, right? Which is, I understand, is a similar notion you're trying to establish here. And then political parties came anyways, and like right out the gate. So I think it's probably unrealistic to expect that if Humanode does take a financial momentum, that political parties, pools, in a sense, won't form also in Humanode.
Yep, they will. We are preparing for it by designing a dashboard that each governor would look into to see how the network in terms of voting becomes centralized, how these people always delegate the vote to this person, and for governments who don't want centralization of the network to basically switch their voice to a smaller person, so to say, on the network in terms of power. And on the topic of like how we govern the blockchains today is pretty much the same that we had in humanity like long ago, because it wasn't always egalitarian, right? It wasn't always like all the citizens have one vote in the elections. It only changed, well, not so long ago.
Well, yeah, even right, Greece, which was purported to be the origin of democracy, right? There was only a select few that actually were considered citizens, right? Even the notion of being a citizen of Greece only emerged after they brought in slaves, and they were looking at the slaves. They're like, wait, these guys don't have any rights. Like, I don't want to be that. We've got to protect ourselves from becoming
Let's
that.
call ourselves citizens and have a voice. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's, this notion is a radical one, the one human, one node. So again, I'm really interested to see how it resolves out. Let me challenge you on two things, if you guys don't mind. One, you're saying before you would like to see um, uptake by Humanode in terms of public institutions. Um, if you do that, we would be able to feature you on the Web of Trust map. So, are you guys doing that? Can we put you on the map somehow? What are you talking about? Because you've mentioned it before. I'm just curious, like what you mean.
Well, look, if governance, do they need privacy? It's it's arguable. You see, they fail at privacy all the time. Maybe they do need it. Do they need civil resistance to figure out the uniqueness of people? Would be cool for voting. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that people also don't vote would be awesome.
I mean,
But yeah, I'm not looking, but basically, well, my goal for one of the goals for life, yeah, let's say, is not bringing the basically biometric private infrastructure to the governments, but one day partner up with the government in terms of changing the economic infrastructure. So what I
Sure.
mean here is that forking, let's say, Humanode blockchain, and then giving every citizen, by of course attaching IDs to the system, not just biometrics, a
Mhm.
node. And then the banks of this country would turn into apps that live on this blockchain, on the shared blockchain of the whole country, let's say, if it's
Mhm.
financial institutions. And well, the real value here is that the fees in that system would still need to go to the citizens who support the national blockchain running on equal citizens with some fees, and it would be part of the banking fees that would probably go from the banks to the people. And this is something where I want to see adoption of Humanode, which doesn't look like happening next year, but we'll see. We'll see. We're writing letters to El Salvador and countries like that.
you know,
Right. I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and going into the voting systems, you look at any major country in the world with their some want people to vote, others want select people to vote. You have America that is going into voter suppression and using all these various excuses. Oh, they're immigrants. Oh, they're this. Oh, they're that. Well, what if the entire system, the voting system, of course, yes, you have to register to vote to prove you're a citizen of the country, but tie it to your biometric identity so that the actual voting only happens through the biometric identity. And you can prove that you're a citizen because you've gone through the test. The only thing is voter data won't necessarily be available to the government. They'll know that X amount of their citizens voted. We don't know if they're male or female, if they're black or white or yellow or brown, but we know X amount of citizens who are alive voted. So it would change the whole scale of how voting goes on. It could change the political scale. But if you're looking at big countries, there's too much vested interest to really start even suggesting something
Oh yeah.
like that.
You
But
have to start small, of course.
yeah, I mean, if there's a small island nation, a smaller country, and
A city. I mean,
yeah,
that enough is that would be more than enough. A town. What if it
hmm
works for them? And if it works on a small scale, you can just progressively expand such trials until
hmm
something happens, right? And it's interesting, right? Because I'm just curious about, right, also thinking about like coherence, right, and statefulness, and if you really are trying to be this sort of public good for communities,
hmm
right? That's a lot of activity. and to synchronize that all on one chain is is a heavy task, right? So I'm curious to see how you guys solve that problem as well. I think that it becomes an interoperability problem by nature pretty quickly, especially as you become more deeply integrated. Um, but maybe Humanode is such a way that they kind of just I don't know. I don't know. Who's to say? I don't really know you guys too well, so I apologize if I misrepresent what you're trying to accomplish.
I just wonder, in your perspective, what is the demand of governments on something we have right now, which is the private biometric uniqueness checks, no other data needed. I mean, governments would usually scan your biometric chip in the passport to right and scan basically all the data you have. That's mostly the identity protocols they currently need,
Right.
or
Yeah, yeah. There's
maybe
no
there's a need.
selective disclosure. There's no selective disclosure. You just have full total release. I mean, we have something actually called MDL, which is mobile driver's license releasing here in America and other places. And what will happen is that people will open their phones and show the police officer, and then the police officer will just take their phone and then like look through it and like see all the associated details. The police doesn't have to, even if the police doesn't take the phone, the police doesn't have to disclose what data it's requesting from you, just like requesting data, right? And then there's even another layer to it where it's like, and this feature that's coming up in Utah, it's like this no phone home notion where there's a mode you can enable on the MDL where literally it says, okay, is this the person that you like is a blacklist? And if the person they register matches that blacklist, it then phones home to the servers so that centralized administrators can know exactly where you are and what you're doing. And so it's there's a lot of there's a lot of demand starting to be built for privacy, for at the very least confidentiality. Privacy is a whole nother level, right? We throw that word around all over the place, privacy, 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 and everyone wants it because it means so many different things to so many different people. But at least you can ensure confidentiality, right? The terms of the engagement, of how you're disclosing information can be limited to you and another party, right? What that person does with the data, obviously is you have to have faith in that. But the going back to it, it's like, yeah, I see a lot of demand actually. And I think what matters is how Humanode in particular builds relationships and espouses its technologies to people who do see the demand, right? Because again, we're entering a world of DPI, digital public infrastructure, right? PKI systems will need to scale in order for digital assets and other sort of public goods to be disseminated across the world, right? And if Humanode can provide services to help resolve that in an attributable way to real humans, right, that preserves their privacy, um, that's a, that's going to be in demand. So again, it's just a matter of right, not just building it, but also integrating it and getting people to believe in it.
Yeah, well, getting governments to believe should be really hard work.
Oh yeah, well that's why you do bottom up, right? Because you're getting market validation. Oh, Niza, hey.
Hi everyone, joining a bit late into the conversation, but I was watching the live stream as much as I could.
Oh, great. Well, if you've been watching the live stream, throw in your opinions. Any thoughts? Any ideas? Anything we're missing?
Well, I think you guys have been having a great conversation. It's a shame I got here a bit late. I was just hearing Nicholas asking a few questions about, your technology and more, and seeing how I can get you in the web of trust. That's also very exciting. But yeah, no, I think in general, a lot of what you've been talking about, and I think where mostly I integrate a bit more is in how much. How much advancements there's been in the industry, right, with digital identity. I think, Nicholas, you mentioned Adar being very well adopted, even though they might not have the best technology. Apparently, in general, they're just been the best adopted. There was a report by Trinsic recently launched that stated that as well. But no, I think in general, we can get the conversation going, and I'll just hop in at any moment now.
Yeah. Well,
We
by
just
the way,
don't have too much time left, so we wanted to hear your opinions.
I'll just say this and then I'll shut up because Niza, we've missed her presence. So Keystate Capital, again, what we're doing is not just the map. We're also building an investment syndicate for, I would say, just the best of the best in digital identity. So if you guys have any projects, including yourselves, that need funding or are interested in acquiring funding, we're send them our way. We're looking for, again, top-notch projects. So, and if you guys have some unique value propositions, we'd love to hear it.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of friends who are doing like parallel stuff in crypto. I think there are many astonishing guys who do private keys now from objects that you have. So I
Yeah.
could take this artificial sugar, make a photo of it, make a
Mhm.
private key out of it, and this would be my artifact for the well, for getting my key back if it's lost. Okay, if I lost my phone or something, and then
That's
there
kinda
are
cool.
also projects who do basically ZK verifiable credentials, which of course you're familiar with. Yeah.
Very much. Very much.
Yes, well, I think actually, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end here, at least for today's fireside. And if you guys are willing to, you're welcome back anytime. Um, love the conversation. Would like to hear more from Niza next time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
You've
it's
heard
a
enough.
pity. It's a pity.
Hopefully next time I won't have a power outage, unfortunately.
It happened to me last week. Same stuff.
Very
Before our
unfortunate.
community call.
Yeah.
So, any final comments? Might as well start with Niza.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the space. Very sorry I couldn't be here for more of the discussion, but definitely looking forward to the next one, and very excited to see what Humanode is planning again. And no, I'm very excited to see as well if at any point we can have you in the research. I'm very excited to have new projects in as always, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it mostly.
Great. Nicholas?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And yeah, we'll be back again, I'm sure. So
Great.
Yeah, I would say that it's awesome to have you guys because you're not a typical fund. You know, usually funds have a website with even no email on it, and that's it, something like that. But you show that you do your research pretty thoroughly, and I've never seen a fund concentrated on just this vertical. I think you will guys succeed because, well, somebody believes in identity. There's no other place to come to if you have a bag of money.
thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And we'll do our best to prove you right.
Okay.
And we'll
Thank
be
you.
following your research. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and have a great day, evening, wherever you
Weekend.
are.
Yeah.
Weekend. There we go. Weekend. Okay. Thank
Thank
you all.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.